It was June 2020, just days after police murdered George Floyd in Minneapolis. The Black Lives Matter demonstrations of that summer were just taking off, including in Washington, D.C., across from the White House in Lafayette Square. On the evening of June the 1st, Trump spoke from the White House Rose Garden, promising law and order in the face of the protests. And as Trump was speaking, law enforcement across the street in Lafayette Square was already carrying out that law and order.
Tear gas is now being fired. You can see what's going on. The police are moving. They're trying to disperse this crowd that has gathered at Lafayette Park. Clearly, they don't want these protesters to be there, even though they were peaceful.
Authorities violently cleared demonstrators with smoke bombs, pepper spray and officers on horseback. Their clearing of the square allowed a famously devout president to visit nearby St. John's Church for a photo op. The violence against mostly peaceful protesters was shocking, appalling. But Republicans wanted to see more of it. 2 days after Lafayette Square, Republican Senator Tom Cotton published this opinion piece in the New York Times with the headline, "Send in the troops. The nation must restore order. The military stands ready." Cotton was urging President Trump to send active duty military into American cities for a, quote, overwhelming show of force against demonstrators. But where would a president actually get the authority for that, to turn U.S. troops on fellow Americans? Cotton said there was a centuries-old law that would give Trump exactly that power. It's called the Insurrection Act. Lest anyone misunderstand, Cotton tripled down on Twitter, quote, "Let's see how tough these Antifa terrorists are when they're facing off with the 101st Airborne Division. Quote, and if necessary, the 10th Mountain, 82nd Airborne, 1st Cav, 3rd Infantry. No quarter for insurrectionists." No quarter, which Cotton, as a former army officer, knew meant take no prisoners, kill them all. A war crime under the Hague Conventions. And this was him calling for no quarter on the streets of America. Cotton's fact-free bloodlust was so over the top that New York Times staffers revolted against a decision to publish his essay. The paper's opinion editor, who ran that column, resigned in disgrace. The Times later said it should not have run the piece. To this day, though, that former Times opinion editor and a bunch of quote-unquote centrist voices insist there was nothing wrong with publishing that piece, even as many of us recognize that what Republicans like Tom Cotton were calling for was undemocratic to its core, a demand for state-sanctioned violence against critics to bring them to their knees. Today, we know that this idea, this concept of weaponizing state power, was becoming more and more popular within Trump's inner circle in that same year, 2020. We now know that inside the Trump re-election campaign and the White House, President Trump's allies were laying the groundwork to stay in power after the election, with violence if necessary. Violence under that same Insurrection Act that Tom Cotton had written about. How do we know all this? Because special counsel Jack Smith told us. According to the indictment delivered on Tuesday night, Trump formed a plan after the 2020 election to install a loyal DOJ lawyer, Jeffrey Clark, as his acting attorney general. So Clark could mobilize the department to claim there was massive election fraud and press swing states to void Joe Biden's victory. But according to this new indictment, on January the 3rd, 2021, 3 days before the real insurrection by Trump supporters on Capitol Hill, a White House lawyer told Clark, who's identified in the filing as co-conspirator 4, that there was no fraud in the election and that if the defendant remained in office, nonetheless, there would be riots in every major city in the United States. That's when Clark, Trump's man, his co-conspirator, replied, quote, "Well, that's why there's an Insurrection Act." Wasn't just Tom Cotton referring to Black Lives Matter protests in summer of 2020. Trump's people in 2021 wanted to use the Insurrection Act to keep Donald Trump in power with violence against their fellow Americans if need be. Trump's allies basically wanted to pretend an insurrection was happening across the country so that they could rise up and squash it with military force. So it's a bit ironic that when an actual insurrection happened on January the 6th, they denied that it was actually an insurrection, the same people who wanted to use the Insurrection Act against others. Let's be clear about this. The 45-page Jack Smith indictment, the United States of America versus Donald J. Trump, which dropped Tuesday evening, outlines 4 charges against a former president, the first time a former president has been indicted for crimes committed while in office. And while that 45-page document doesn't use the words coup or insurrection to describe the crimes against democracy allegedly committed by Trump, that's what it was, a coup attempt followed by an insurrection. It was always premised on the need for violence. The indictment even lays out how, as Trump supporters violently attacked the Capitol and halted the proceeding, and, quote, as violence ensued, Trump and his co-conspirators exploited the disruption by redoubling efforts to levy false claims of election fraud and convince members of Congress to further delay their certification based on those claims. They exploited the violence. And they never hid, even before the 2020 election, that violence was at the core of their plan to stay in office and stave off any protests. But Trump's interest in state-sponsored violence was clear well before Joe Biden beat him in November 2020, even before Tom Cotton published that Times essay in June 2020. Donald Trump, the sitting president, was talking about it right in the open.
If a city or state refuses to take the actions that are necessary to defend the life and property of their residents, then I will deploy the United States military and quickly solve the problem for them.
We could fix Portland in, I would say, 45 minutes.
That's the way it has to be. There has to be retribution.
There has to be retribution. Here is a president who we now know wanted to literally cripple his political opponents at the time. As former Defense Secretary Mark Esper recalled in his memoir, Trump asked him about the social justice protesters, can't you just shoot them? Just shoot them in the legs or something? Trump's cronies were equally keen on violence, whether of the state-sponsored or mob-like variety. Here's General Michael Flynn, former Trump national security advisor and convicted and then pardoned criminal in the weeks ahead of January the 6th.
It's not unprecedented. I mean, these people out there talking about martial law, it's like it's something that we've never done. Martial law has been instituted 64 times.
Yes, that was former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn justifying the use of martial law, of military rule, as a means to overturn the election and keep the Trump administration in power. But that wasn't their only strategy, because Texas Representative Louis Gohmert filed a lawsuit against then Vice President Mike Pence, which would have essentially forced him to overturn the results of the election. And when that suit was thrown out by a federal judge ahead of the 6th of January insurrection, here's what Gohmert had to say.
Basically, in effect, the ruling would be that you got to go to the streets and be as violent as Antifa and BLM.
That was January the 2nd, 2021, encouraging violence and telling Trump supporters on national television to take to the streets, just days before Trump supporters would storm the Capitol. These comments were even flagged by Capitol Police analysts who feared his speech would promote actual violence on the day, on January the 6th. But if you thought what we saw in 2020 and 2021 was quote-unquote unprecedented in terms of the incitement of political violence, if you think Jeffrey Clark, per the new indictment, telling a White House lawyer that they'll just use the Insurrection Act to suppress pro-democracy protesters is bad, just wait until 2024. Wait until next year. Because with each Trump indictment comes a new call for violence and more fuel for Trump's vicious base.
If that, for example, they do, say Jack Smith says, okay, I'm going to put Donald Trump in jail.
I think it's a very dangerous thing to even talk about, because we do have a tremendously passionate group of voters. I think it would be very dangerous.
Former President Trump warned that death and destruction is possible if he's indicted.
He's got the baseball bat next to Alvin Bragg's head, obviously inciting violence there.
Around with us. If you do something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
Threats, intimidation, abuse. It's horrifying. And yet what we're seeing from Trump isn't actually new in American politics, sadly. There has always been this strain of far-right violence and incendiary rhetoric in the US, especially targeted against minorities, against people of color. In fact, Congress tried to deal with that kind of violence a long time ago with the 1871 Enforcement Act, better known as the Ku Klux Klan Act. Passed during the Reconstruction era, the act was designed to stop terrorist groups like the KKK from using intimidation and violence to suppress the black vote. It lives in U.S. Criminal Code under Section 241, and it's all about protecting voters under the 14th Amendment, aka the right to vote. Section 241 had some high-profile appearances in American history in cases of voter suppression and violence against voting rights activists, including the 1967 Mississippi burning trial, where more than a dozen KKK members were charged under the act for the murder and disappearance of 3 civil rights workers. The list of people charged under that law is full of neo-Nazis and white supremacists. Now joining that list, former president and GOP presidential frontrunner Donald Trump. In Tuesday's indictment, Jack Smith accused Trump of violating Section 241 by pursuing a, quote, conspiracy against the right to vote and to have one vote counted. And let's be clear, it was black votes Donald Trump was targeting. How do we know this? Well, in a series of failed voter fraud lawsuits back in 2020, Trump went after cities with high populations of black voters, cities like Atlanta, Georgia, Detroit, Michigan, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And while those lawsuits were not unlawful themselves, what Trump did next, per the indictment, was, after failing to overturn the will of largely black voters through those lawsuits, Trump attacked those exact same states with his infamous fake elector scheme and pressured state officials to, quote-unquote, find him more voters. So put simply, Trump's words and actions are horrifying, but his tactics actually not that new. He was carrying on a bigoted tradition of suppressing the black vote in America through any means necessary. Now, in a normal world, you'd think this type of behavior would push a presidential candidate out of the race, especially after an event as violent as the January 6th insurrection. But no, Trump's poll numbers have actually gone up and continue to go up after each indictment. And so it has now come to this. Donald J. Trump, the first president ever to be impeached twice, will now campaign for his old job while facing 78 charges in 3 separate criminal cases in New York, Florida, and Washington, D.C. Charges for which he could, if convicted, face hundreds of years of prison time. Just the 4 charges announced by Jack Smith this week could net Trump a 55-year total jail sentence. Including civil suits, Trump will be bouncing back and forth between Republican presidential debates and 6 court trials. 6. And there may soon be a 7th. He could still face charges in Georgia for his scheme to try and find around 12,000 extra votes there to overturn Joe Biden's victory. Already, police have begun erecting barricades in Atlanta in anticipation of those charges and a violent backlash from Trump supporters. How do you ensure the security of all those court proceedings in all those places? How do you protect the judges, the jurors, the lawyers from the wrath of Trump and his most dangerous supporters? Back in May, when a jury unanimously held Trump responsible for sexually abusing and defaming writer E. Jean Carroll, the trial judge thanked the jurors for their service and then told them, quote, "My advice to you is not to identify yourselves, not now and not for a long time." All of the everyday Americans who sit in judgment of Donald Trump are doing so at the risk of their own safety, and not just in court, but at their voting precincts too. How are we going to secure the 2024 election under this kind of pressure from Trump, his supporters, the GOP? How are we going to protect American democracy? And perhaps crucially, how will my colleagues in the media cover all of this heading into 2024? The multiple trials, the 78 counts, the encouragement of violence from a political movement that relies on violence. This isn't a traditional horse race. There are no both sides here. 2024 is now in many ways a fight for America's survival, a contest between messy democracy and bloody authoritarianism. Last time, our democracy survived, but only barely. Are we really prepared for the next time?